Hi everybody, welcome. My name's Daniel. We will start in a couple of minutes, just going to give other participants a bit of time to join the meeting. While we're waiting to get started, please use the chat to introduce yourself, your name, union, branch or office. My colleague Sam has just posted in the chat as well the TUC's meeting code of conduct, so do take a moment to have a look at that.
The people are seeing that's good for us, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like none of the support staff are going to move across to NEU, right? They're all.
And I should also say, just a reminder, if you don't want your conversations to be overheard by others in this webinar, keep yourself on mute, please. So the other thing that I'm going to do whilst we're waiting is we have a WhatsApp group for trade unionists organising with outsourced workers. I'd like to invite you to join. It's mainly focused on the London East and Southeast region of England, because that's where myself and my colleague Sam Gurney work in the TUC. But very welcome if you're from another region or Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to join as well. So click on the link in the chat to join that WhatsApp group. And for those who've just joined us, we're going to start in a couple of minutes. We had close to 75 people register for this webinar. We've got about coming up to 30 on the call at the moment. So just going to give it a minute or two for other people to join and then we'll get started. Do as Rad and Callum have done from Unison Eastern region, and be as well. Say hello in the chat, give your name, your union and where you're from. Thanks. Right, I think we will make a start now. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Daniel Shannon Hughes. I work in the TUC's London East and Southeast Regional Office. Very glad to have you all join us for this webinar this morning. We're going to be looking at using targeted research to support insourcing campaigns. It's fantastic to see so many of you on the call from different unions, different regions. We've got a mix of union officers and activists as well, so it's fantastic to have you all here this morning. A bit of housekeeping from me before we begin. This webinar is being recorded. You might have noticed the flashing light in the top of your screen. The video will be circulated afterwards, and we'll also put it up on the TUC Education YouTube channel as well. There's going to be presentations from our speakers, and we'll circulate any PowerPoint slides afterwards and links as well. Please remember to keep your mic on mute unless you're invited to speak. And if you are speaking, I ask you to keep your contributions short to allow others to contribute as well. Less than a minute is ideal. Please don't take offence if I ask you to wrap up or I cut you off if you are going on much longer than this. We have an hour and we've got 3 excellent speakers to hear from, and then hopefully we'll have 15 to 20 minutes to hear your questions and also your contributions as well, because I know we've got a lot of excellent experience on the call. Please do feel free to comment in the chat. Sam is going to be keeping an eye on the chat and will make sure that I don't miss anything in there. And finally, I just wanted to remind everybody of the TUC's meeting code of conduct. It's in the chat already, but hopefully, Sam, you can put it in the chat again now for anyone who's joined us a little later. So this webinar is part of the Our It Matters campaign. It's a collaborative joint union campaign led by members of trade unions organising with outsourced workers and supported by us at the TUC. Our aim here today is to give you an introduction to how you can use targeted research to support the campaigns by looking at outsourcing companies and indeed contracting bodies so that you can strengthen your campaigns with outsourced workers. We've got an hour in total, and so we won't be able to go into really fine detail of how you do this research. What we want to do is give you an idea of what's possible and signpost you to where you can go for more information and resources and support. I want to say at this point as well that your union may well have its own research department who can help you with this. So it's definitely worth asking within your union if there is support available for your campaigns. So we'll hear first from Freya Lockley from Corporate Watch, a research and training group that helps people stand up against corporate power. Freya is going to speak about profiling a company. We'll then hear from Maya Kirby from Good Jobs First. Maya will introduce Violation Tracker UK, which is the first wide-ranging searchable database of corporate infringements brought against companies by government regulators. And then lastly, we'll hear from Tabsum Ahmed, who is a regional officer for Unite in London and Eastern region. And Tabsum's going to speak about practical experience of using targeted research in a campaign. Okay, so Freya, if I can hand over to you, I'm just going to bring your slides up and then you can begin. Sure.
So yeah, the next slide, please. Hello, everyone. So I'm from Corporate Watch. We've been going since 1996, and we emerged from ecological direct action movement in the 1990s. We're proudly anti-capitalist, and all of our research is embedded by a core principle, which is information for action. So what we do is we do the research, and the goal of the research is always to share that with grassroots movements, direct activists, unions, and any other campaign groups, specifically to help them use research in order to make change. So that's the sort of, everything we do is based on this principle of information for action. It's not just abstract research. The purpose is always to try and enact change and to support the movements. Could I have the next slide, please? So, for example, sometimes our research, it often comes to us via whistleblowers. So we make a concerted effort to try and raise the profile for campaigns as and where we can. So this is just a few examples of ways in which our research has gone out in a wider scope. Next slide. And the reason why we research companies is, as I said, it's this principle of research for action. So we've done, for example, a lot of work to support gig economy employers and unions using our research tools so that when the bosses say we can't afford a pay rise or we can't afford to improve conditions, we can do the research, and very often we share that with the process with the groups that we're working with in order to say, actually, you do have the money. And so we can then give that information to unions and workers in order to help leverage campaigns. So that's proved hugely successful over the years, and we've helped a number of different unions and different employees to secure that. Another way we use it is for wider campaigns. So, for example, we were part of a campaign to stop TUI, which at the time we did the research was one of the biggest. The airline was deporting thousands of people. As part of that wider campaign that we played a part in, TUI stepped back. It didn't mean that we stopped the deportation industry, but we did at least put enough pressure on one company to pull out from that profit-making industry. And very often the picture of the rabbits, that was a campaign we helped a very small group of activists with to stop the illegal farming of rabbits for fur. Next slide, please. Another core part of our work is training. We call it Do It Together training. So all of our research tools, we are always more than happy. In fact, we actively encourage groups to come along so we can share the tools, and in workshops, do it together to help empower various different groups and movements to engage with this kind of research for themselves. So that's just a selection of the people that we've worked with recently. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to come on to just giving a very, very brief outline to the way that our process works. Normally we'd have a day in a workshop, so just going to be a very quick whistle-stop tour through the principles that are embedded in all of our trainings and all of the research we do. Slide, please. So we always start from the first place. And once we have these blocks in place, that enables us to send the research and expand it into different areas. One key thing is finding the actual parent company. As we know, the world of corporate, it's hugely messy. So we may know a company operating under one name, and then we dig down and find out that, for example, it's owned by a vast multinational in America. Then we use a lot of open source information. So Companies House, from where we can get information about owners, the annual reports and accounts and directors, and also any other companies that those people may be connected to. Annual reports are another great source of treasure, and these are produced as corporate gloss by the companies. And I don't think they always realise how much useful information there is when you approach them from a campaigning perspective. So, for example, there was some research we did into Mighty to support the refugees at Manston camp. We put out a report and we got a list of about 30 corrections from the Mighty PR office. And when we went through the corrections, we realised that a huge amount of the information they'd objected to actually came from their own annual report. So very often simply sharing, knowing what to look for from the information that the company is putting out can be a really, really useful tool for campaigning. We also can find a lot of other information on company websites. It can fill in the gaps. There's quite often really important press releases that go out via the company's shareholders. And for example, a list of directors of other companies that they may have worked for. And from that, we can start to build a sense of revolving doors. Next slide, please. So the basis of most of our research is this concept of following the money. We will use our research tools to look for things like how much a company is making, how much has it made this year against how much has it made last year. Where does that money go? As we know, all companies are operating for profit, and that profit goes to the shareholders, to the owners, and to the directors. So particularly from a union perspective, that kind of information can often be really vital to helping to secure better paying conditions for the people that you're representing. Another core part of that is looking into contracts and how much public money is this company making. There are some relatively easy to access sites, and it is eye-watering seeing that the millions of pounds of money, government money, taxpayers' money, is going directly to private companies, and beginning to lift the lid on how much, particularly say for the NHS, because there's millions going into private companies. So we'll look at all of those aspects of money and then extend the research out into the next slide, please. Another vital source of information is the key players. Who's behind it? Are there revolving doors? What kind of patterns do people follow going from one company to another company to another company? We'll also search for political links and donations and try and catalogue any money that we know is coming from individuals straight through to any political party. What kind of other business interests do they have that can often reveal, I was going to say shady dealings, but I guess once you found the information, they would like to think it isn't shady. And any history, dubious dealings, for example, have they got a record of tribunals? And what kind of other areas are they operating in? What we find is really interesting in the corporate research is very often something will appear bigger than the others, but we always look at these areas and build a portfolio of information or a dossier if it's for a campaign group. One bit of information on its own may not look like much, but what we found starts to happen is that when you catalogue a range of pieces of information side by side, they begin to tell an interesting story, and that can be really useful for leverage and for campaigns. Next slide, please. So at the heart of everything we do as we collate this information is coming back to this idea of leverage. Can we identify any weak spots in the company? The corporate PR machine is huge, and ultimately they're always trying to preserve their own reputation. We've got to be very careful. We can't make any malicious claims. We're very well aware of defamation law, but what we can do is draw attention to things that emerge through doing this kind of research that may indicate that at this point or that point, a company may be weak. Have they been caught out doing any regulatory breaches? What kind of tribunal record do they have? Because that can tell us a lot about how they treat their workers. What kind of relationships might they have with lobbying departments? Have they been caught out operating with any kind of financial misconduct hearings? Shareholder meetings can also be really useful. We're now in AGM season, so you may have seen on the news, there's quite a lot of attention being placed on some of the big companies. So for example, I think Shell BP this week, Drax was recently, and again, around the time of the shareholder informations, the companies will often produce a new set of company accounts, a new annual report, and we can glean a lot more information about what might be going on with that company. Reports and accounts, as you probably know, are done a year behind. So very often what we find at the point of a shareholders meeting, because they want to boast about how much money they're making, is a quarterly report or a half yearly report. So if you know when a shareholder meeting is going to take place, it's always worth keeping an eye out, because you'll very often find a new set of financial details that won't necessarily appear on the full set of annual accounts for a following year. New acquisitions are another thing that we always keep an eye on, because it's the case that the giant multinationals are swallowing up smaller companies as they go. 9 times out of 10, what happens when an acquisition takes place is that paying conditions for the people in that company will suffer on the whole, because at the top of the pyramid, the focus on reinvestment of ROI and more profit making very often has a huge impact for the workers at a lower level. Next slide, please. So what I thought I'd do today, we won't have time to go through much, but is just share one route for finding out who's earning the most at the top of the company. Because from that, particularly if you as reps are trying to bargain for pay increases or better terms and conditions, that alone can be hugely valuable to you. For large companies, the most recent annual report, have a look for that. The reason being is if you've got access to an annual report, it's a PDF and it's much easier to search. If that company doesn't have one, go to the most recent set of accounts on Companies House. For the larger companies, you'll find a photocopied version of the annual report on Companies House. Sometimes, and in fact, for the 2 companies that I was asked to look into today, you can do a search in inverted, if you put the company name in inverted commas, and then remuneration report or annual report, but all in inverted commas. Very often you can get directly just to a remuneration report without having to go through all of the information in an annual report or the set of accounts. If you've got a PDF, you can use Control F and search for remuneration. To find what you're looking for is information about highest paid directors, key management, or remuneration report. It's phrased slightly differently in all sets of accounts. Very often you'll find it in notes to the accounts, which appear after the accounts. If the document is on Companies House and that it's a smaller company, just keep scrolling, keep your eyes out for this word remuneration. And it takes a bit of time, but once you've practiced it a few times, you begin to get a sense of what to look out for. So if we go on to the next slide, I'll show you how that looks in practice. So Daniel had asked me to look at 2 companies that I know have been part of various union campaigns recently. So one is ISS. They very neatly had an entire remuneration report, which is where this screenshot was taken from. There are a few things to look out for on here. If you see at the top, and sorry, I haven't got my clicker, but where it says remuneration, I've circled that because it's what we call the multiplier. That tells you that all of the figures in here relate, when it's not Danish kroner, then you'll see either dollars or pounds, and whether that refers to millions or to thousands. Oh, sorry, Dennis, go back. So we know here that each of these numbers relates to 1,000 Danish kroner. We can also see the increase. So the top guy, Kasper Fangel, now he did change role this year, but if you look at those figures on the percentage increase, his salary, overall salary, went up 78.8% this year, which I'm sure to you as union reps is really valuable information. Most at the top end, their pay package will consist of a base salary and a series of benefits, which are very often shares. So we'll often find at the top of the company, those people also are key shareholders. Basically, if this is useful, this guy, in British pounds, his total package last year was worth nearly £2.5 million, which I'm sure for any ISS employees who are working for minimum wage with shattered pay and conditions might be useful information for them. Go on to the next slide. The OCS accounts were interesting. So this was taken from their annual report, and this came in the notes to the financial statements, which came after the main accounts. This time I didn't find direct information about the named highest paid director. Now, if we were in a workshop, we would do more work to look at who that was. My assumption is it might be this guy, Daniel Dickinson, but I'm not sure. And again, we see that the multiplier is in thousands. So whoever the highest paid director was, they earned over £1 million in 2023. If you look at the top of this, but that I've highlighted in yellow, you'll see it says OCS Group Topco Limited, which goes back to that point I made at the beginning, that we might refer to this group widely as OCS. But OCS Topco is the parent company, and below that are a series of subsidiaries. So the parent company will show the accounts for all of the subsidiaries, which is known as the group. And it very clearly says in here that the pay awards to the top people are being paid by the subsidiaries. I hope that's not too much information. I was hoping for a really simple pointer, but in some ways it's useful just to show that the information is always there. And next slide, and I think we're there within time, I hope. So thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody. And I think we're going to come back to questions at the end.
That's great. Thank you, Freya. Really good introduction and overview of where to get started. Maya, if I can invite you to come in now, please.
Thanks, Freya. I really enjoyed that. I'm Maya. I'm the project coordinator for Violation Tracker UK at Good Jobs First. So we are a US-based organisation focused on corporate accountability. So tracking corporate subsidies and corporate regulatory breaches. here in the UK, we produce Violation Tracker UK. So this is the UK's first wide-ranging database of corporate regulatory infringements. It's completely free to use. We track over 90 different agencies. So what I'm going to do is just share my screen and to show you a little bit about how the database works. So here's our landing page. So as you can see, we've got 3 options for choosing what you want to search. So here you can put in any companies. So you can see here the recent companies that I've been looking at. You don't have to fill these boxes, but you can. These are the different offence groups. So you can see a wide range of different offences. And here's a list of all of the government agencies that we track. It's growing every month. It grows a bit more usually. So I'll just show you with one of our notorious companies, Tesco, a little bit about how it works. So here we've searched for Tesco. Tesco is one of our parent companies. So in our parent universe of big companies that get their own page. So I'm going to click here, and here we have Tesco's parent company summary. So you can see since 2010, Tesco has paid 169 million in penalties for corporate misconduct. Down here, it breaks this down a little bit. So you can see, although it's paid the most for financial offences, it has committed a much far higher number of employment offences. There's 53 there. And here we go into even more detail. And if you scroll right down, you can have a look at each individual fine or penalty. So the top one here is by the Serious Fraud Office for 132 million. Next, we've got a privacy violation from the FCA, oil spill. So you can see they have a wide range of different offences, Office of Fair Trading. And here we have the fine paid for non-payment of minimum wage. If we click on it, we can find out a little bit more about that individual case. So this is the amount that was paid in arrears to workers in 2020. But Tesco is one of those that keep coming back onto the list of companies that are named and shamed by the Department for Business and Trade. I will leave that there. That gives you a little sense of what's on and how you use the database and what's on there. I can tell you a little bit about the work we do around the database. So we have a very diverse set of global users, from journalists to academics, campaigners, even government agencies use our data, especially some of them that have very bad records of themselves. Particularly of interest to us is trade union users. We're particularly focused on supporting trade union campaigns to use the data. Part of our funding comes under the Labour Rights Programme, the Network for Social Change. So really important to us. So for the last 2.5 years, we've found that the data has been used for negotiations. So knowing where a company has not paid minimum wage, where a company has lost multiple employment tribunals, whether it's wage theft or discrimination cases, research basically into different kinds of breaches that can be used as leverage, or for context in media coverage of disputes. So for instance, it probably won't come as a surprise to you all that the Royal Mail have lost the most employment tribunal cases since 2017. Network Rail have the worst safety record. It won't come as a surprise because workers have been on the front line, fighting for these services, and the evidence backs that up. But in media reports, we don't get that company profile for the most part. It's focused on pay demands, when in lots of cases there is a wider story of corporate misconduct. we've also looked at the data. We also use it to look into procurement, and that's very useful for insourcing campaigns. Watch this space, because we are about to publish a briefing with the TUC on the new Procurement Act, which will give a little bit more information about how we can use Violation Tracker and to push pressure contracting authorities to use their powers of discretionary and mandatory exclusion. And here it might be worth mentioning that we also produce a database called Violation Tracker Global, which tracks the world's largest companies. So definitely worth looking at that. That's also relevant for procurement in this country. We've done a lot of work with different organisations, collaborative work. Last year, we worked with the Work Rights Centre, and we found that almost 200 firms with a licence to sponsor workers had committed employment breaches in the last 3 years. And we also recognise that workers, when we do trainings, we recognise that workers actually are just as much interested in rogue employers, just as much as they're interested in rogue employers. We are all affected by different rogue companies in our lives. So whether that's energy companies, housing, banking, so we work across sectors, and work across sectors to encourage people to see regulatory enforcement as a public protection that we can use for organising. Last year we had a conference, Protecting What We Care About, which we produced a report to go alongside. I'll just share the screen on that, and this gave a background to the state of UK regulatory enforcement. So you can see in our summary what we believe the UK regulatory system is not delivering, and that's some of the insights that we've had from tracking these agencies that are supposed to be protecting people, and they are just not doing their job, which probably will not come as a surprise to everybody on this call, but here are the figures. So I will leave it there. To leave time for questions. Am I back on there? Thanks. So we offer trainings for unions, and we publish a monthly newsletter, and we're always open to working with others. So please do get in touch, and I will just share my details so you can just quickly take a note of those. So there's my email. Please do get in touch. There's the address of the database that you could, it's completely free to search, and of course all our trainings and everything are free. So please do get in touch if you want to work together on anything. We're always happy to hear from people, so please do get in touch. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Maya. It's such a great resource, Violation Tracker, and really eye-opening when you look at it. And just to say that we'll circulate Maya's contact details and the Violation Tracker website, and also the Corporate Watch website, in an email afterwards, if you didn't catch them there. Right, our final speaker, Tabassum, is going to talk about practical experience of using targeted research in a campaign. Tabassum, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm the lead health officer for Unite the Union London and Eastern Region. And the example I'm going to give you is not specific to insourcing, but it's exactly the same sort of process we follow when we are targeting outsourced work, an outsourced company, or when we're trying to get a group of workers insourced. So the example I'm going to give you is of the day surgery theatre nurses in Guy's and St Thomas's that were out on strike last year. They were out on strike because their finish time was changed from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. They had already accepted a change from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. So having an end finish time for 9 p.m. was not acceptable, because quite often they don't actually finish at 9 p.m. because with day surgery, there's always complications that arise. So they have to wait for somebody to be admitted into a ward or for them to be discharged. So they always end up going home 10, 11 and not getting home to 12 o'clock, which completely meant that they had no life whatsoever. They didn't have a morning with their family or an evening. So we came to a point in the summer of last year when negotiations had come to a standstill. Management were not moving at all. We had to really review where we were. So Unite does this strike plan. It's called a fret paper. And I'm just going to share my screen just to give you a flavour of it. I'm not going to go into it because it incorporates what Freya and Maya have said, what they do to find out about companies and organisations. But this was on Guy's and St Thomas's. So in terms of Guy's and St Thomas's, the key things that I look at as an officer is who are the actual decision makers. And this gave us an overview of the board and what organisations they had any connections or links with. So for us, the key people were the chief executive. And here you can see what connections he had. He's no longer the chief executive, by the way, so don't note any of this here. The chief nurse, Avi
Sorry,
Bhatia.
Tabassum, just to stop you. I don't think we can see what you're trying to share.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me try again. Anyway, can you see it now?
Yes, can see it now.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm just going to quickly just give a just a couple of minutes on the key things that I look at as an officer when I'm targeting a organization. So we looked at the decision makers. So for us, the key people were the chief executive, the chief nurse, and then the chair of the board, who is Charles Alexander. And on this side, you can see what connections they have with any external organizations. So those are the three people we focused on. I'm just going to stop sharing for a sec. So what we then did, we produced a flyer. First of all, on that flyer, we put a QR code, which meant that whoever clicked on that QR code, it sent a direct email to the chief executive. So we got an email from anybody who decided to do that. We stood outside the hospitals and we started putting those flyers out to members of the public, highlighted the QR code. It was very quick. All they had to do was scan it and press send, because it was already set up to have a message saying, please end this dispute, listen to your nurses, end the 9 p.m. finish time. The next thing we then did was to actually put their faces of those three people on a placard, which was about 4 foot high, 3 foot wide. We used it as a petition board, and we stood outside St Thomas's Hospital and Guy's Hospital and asked people to sign it. And I'm just going to share my window again to show you what that actually looks like or looked like. And here we have it. We had the three key people who were the decision makers who we wanted to apply pressure on. We said, stop exploiting our nurses. And it was a message to them. And we asked members of the public to fill this up. We had, quite a number full, and they were quite large placards. What we then did was to actually get these delivered fully gift wrapped, so they didn't know what they were receiving, to each member of the board in Guy's and St Thomas's. Of course, this was starting to cause a lot of agitation, and they did legally threaten us with defamation. Of course, that didn't go anywhere because it wasn't defamation. They were key people who made decisions, and we were asking them to listen to our nurses. Once we did that, I've got to say, when you see people getting agitated, that means it's working. You are actually doing something right because you're drawing attention to them. And they were getting extremely agitated. They were sending me emails asking me to stop, accusing me of all sorts. And I said, we can stop this right now. Come back to the negotiating table. They will continue to refuse. So then we gave further notice of strike action. Thought, okay, we've got to go out on strike again, guys. We've got to do this. But what we did was put in a strike plan. So we looked at the key connections these three people had. So Ian Abbs had a connection with the London Hospital, which is a private hospital, where he was a renal physician. Charles Alexandra had a connection with Opera Rara, which is a charity organisation in a very affluent area in Battersea, near Battersea Station. And Avi Bhatia, the chief nurse, was the vice president of the Florence Nightingale Foundation. So in each of those strike days, we visited those places every single day. And we were out there chanting. We gave flyers out with their faces on it and a QR code for them for members of the public to email them and the organization asking them to stop. At each place, we had the organization come out and say, can you please move along? We've got a conference going on, or these are people being disturbed. And the message was, speak to Avi Bhatia, speak to Ian Abs, and speak to Charles Alexandra. So we were really, really ramping it up. We also then looked at when the next board meeting was and whether it was a public meeting or not. And it was. So what we did was take these petition boards to the public meeting. Of course, we were approached with a number of security. I'm quite a short person, for those of you who have met me. So it wasn't intimidating. I'm never intimidated. We were asked to leave those boards outside. So what we then did was to put them in a row near the entrance of where people had to come into that board meeting. So people had to see it. There was no way that they could not get rid of those. They tried to push us out of the boundary of the hospital because they said we were trespassing. So we did go outside the boundary, but again, people had to go past to see it. Myself and a rep actually entered the board meeting as a member of the public, and we were allowed to. We made sure we got our question in on time, and we put the question to the board, asking them why they were not listening to their nurses and that they had to stop this straight away. The chief of nurse said other hospitals have 9 p.m. finishes. My response was, if one place was saying it's okay for you to jump off the cliff, do you think it's okay to ask the next person to jump off the cliff? I don't think so. They were obviously put under a lot of scrutiny and pressure at that board meeting by other members of the public, then having follow-up questions. So, they were, right at this time, they were really annoyed. And this is what we sort of called leverage, and Maya and Freya have referred to this as well. It's about annoying people, I'm afraid, agitating them and getting under their skin. And I think that board meeting was probably the last straw for them, because we gave flyers out, which also had the QR code where members of the public could also email them again. They got hundreds of emails. The board members' email addresses were blocked because we checked a few because they received too many. They couldn't function. And then I approached the chief of nurse at the end of that meeting. Now, sadly, while we were doing all of this escalation, what happened was these theatre nurses were predominantly migrant workers. They were from the Philippines and other areas. And sadly, because of the escalation, they started indirectly saying that isn't your visa up for renewal, trying to really scare and intimidate them. So at the end of that meeting, I did think about it. Should I say it in the public meeting? I thought I'm going to give them another chance because we do want to negotiate at the end of the day and resolve this dispute. So then what I said was, you have a choice. You can either come back to the table and negotiate and resolve the dispute, but on the basis that you confirm that all of those people whose visas need to be renewed are renewed, or we're going to escalate. Abby didn't think we could escalate further. I gave her the examples that we will put out a press release. We will go onto social media, quote what the nurses had been told, and also we will have a van with all 3 of their names on, faces on them, going around the hospital, telling everybody what they were doing. Thankfully, she contacted me the following morning, and I'm pleased to say we reversed the 9 p.m. finish time. Thank you.
Brilliant, Tabasum. Really inspiring. Thank you. And thanks again to Freya and Maya as well for your excellent presentations. So we are running to time, which is good. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'll open it up to questions and contributions in a moment. Just a reminder that we will circulate a recording afterwards of this, and also links and presentations that have been referred to. So please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. I'll take 2 or 3 and then go back to our speakers. As I said at the start, to allow others to come in as well, please keep your contributions short. And you can also put questions in the chat, and Sam's going to keep an eye on the chat as well. So, do we have any questions from the room? Well, in which case, oh, Andy, would you like to come in?
You're muted, Andy. You're muted, Andy. We can't hear you.
I'm afraid we can't
Can you
hear you, Andy.
unmute him from where you are, Daniel?
No, I can't. Do you want to try and put your question in the chat instead, Andy, to type it in?
Unfortunately, the chat is not working.
Oh, I'm sorry it's not working for you, Rob. We've got other people in the chat. While we try and sort that out, Dennis, would you like to come in with your question? I also can't hear you, Dennis.
Right. Sorry, can you hear me now?
There we go. Can hear you now.
Yeah.
Good. I was just
Sorry.
about to panic.
That was me by end, definitely. Sorry. You think we'd be used to it by now, wouldn't you? Yeah, excellent presentations. Thanks very much. Really interesting. I've got a double-barreled question actually. The first bit, I suppose, is about campaigning and so forth, and the differences between outsourcing from the public sector to the private sector. But specifically more for us, what we have a lot of is from the private sector to the private sector. So big companies who then outsource their maybe facilities management or those sort generally services or call centers and so forth. And the differences, I wonder if there is a difference between researching those and campaigning around those. But the second thing I was going to ask about was obtaining information about the value of the outsourced contracts to the outsourcer from the. I've not really seen this sort of information in company reports, you know, so like how much a company is actually paying for the service to the outsourcer service provider. I don't know if that stuff is actually publicly available. Quite possibly it isn't, but it'd be very useful to know if it was. Cheers.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm just going to pick up a question in the chat as well, and then we'll go back to Tabassum, Maya, and Freya. Andy's asked, and it's a question from Maya, does your remit include charities and other non-statutory organisations, especially large national groups, who are corporate and indistinguishable from private sector firms? Maya, do you want to come back on that first question, and then we'll go to Tabassum and Freya?
Yes, we do. We track charities. We don't track public bodies, with the exception of the NHS. So that question on outsourcing, yes, we'd be using it for tracking companies. And handing over to Freya for the question on finding the value of contracts.
And in answer to that questions on charities, we research charities in exactly the same way that we do companies, and as many of them operate under dubious circumstances as others. And the way we would use Companies House for a company, we use Charity Commission to access the same information. In terms of outsourcing, did you mean finding the value going from private companies to private companies, or did you mean?
Yeah, ideally, I suppose it's easier in the public sector to find that sort of information because I guess it's under FOI and that sort of thing. But I'm just wondering if that's the sort of thing that would be published in a company report, an annual return or something like that. I'm not sure. I can't recall ever seeing it, to be honest.
I would say it could well be there in the annual reports or in the accounts, and I'm not an accountant, but I can read accounts if that makes sense. So it's just a question of knowing what you're looking for. So it's a really interesting question, actually. So feel free to get in touch. If you've got the names of specific companies, we can see if we can put you on track to find them. And certainly for public accounts, anything that's, I'd go to Contracts Finder or Find a Tender, and anything pre-2016, something called TED, which is Tenders European Daily. There are also similar, there's one for, it's not just about England, it is a Welsh one and a Scottish one and one for the north of Ireland as well. So all of those, the major contracts you can find on there, but sometimes they take a bit of searching. So it's something we're always willing to speak more about if we can be useful.
Thanks, Freya. Tabassum?
Okay, so Dennis, just on that point, we do ask for that information from the companies, from the NHS, from the local authority. If they don't provide it, we ask for it under freedom of information. And quite often we do get the information, and then we compare it to also what profit that company is making, who it's been outsourced to from that particular service. So there are ways and means of getting it. It is a bit of a struggle to get it, but we do eventually get there in some shape or form. So it is out there. You can get it. It's just the struggle to get there in the end. In terms of distinguishing between the private companies and going to another outsourced company, in Unite, we use the same principle. We always target the parent company, whether that's a local authority, whether it's the NHS, or whether that's a private company outsourcing to another private company, because those are the ones who are going to make a difference in terms of that actual contract being outsourced or retaining it within there, and even the value of that outsource and the terms and conditions of it. And I'll give you an example for NHS Barts Trust, where we had an outsourced company called Synergy, which we campaigned to go back in-house, but they couldn't actually take them back in-house because they didn't have the facilities. But because of the campaigning, they ensured that going forward now from the 1st of May of 2023, that all the pay terms and conditions were in line with Agenda for Change. So the principle that Unite uses is exactly the same. It doesn't matter where you are. And that's why I used the example I did, because it's exactly the same tactic. And just currently now, we're in dispute with Essentia, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guy's and St Thomas's. And we are targeting Guy's and St Thomas's as well as the buildings that Essentia uses. So that's how Unite goes about campaigning.
Can I just add one more thing to that? As you know, when I was talking about acquisitions, very, very often when there's an attempt to get some kind of outsourcing, you might well see the entire smaller company being swallowed up as a subsidiary, because then they can hide the whole chain of money within their company accounts. That's another one to keep an eye out for.
Thanks. Are there any more questions? So, okay,
Can I just...
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to add something to all of you who are here. Look, we're out of time. That strike action alone isn't enough. And what I'm finding is going full-blown leverage as soon as you can when they are not moving is very effective. And that's what we've got to try and do, alongside getting the maximum number of members actually voting in industrial action ballot. So, please do explore it. People are quite nervous of doing it. Just make sure you do check with your legal department in terms of what you put out, because employers, whether they're the local authority, NHS and private companies, are ready. They are ready to be challenged. We were challenged by Guy's and St Thomas's on twice, on 2 occasions throughout that dispute. So be prepared for that. But don't be shy of targeting them with that information that Maya and Freya have also talked about today.
Thanks, Tabassum. And I know that both Maya and Freya are really happy for campaigns to get in touch for support, which is a really great resource, as well as I mentioned beforehand, going to your unions to see if their own research department can support your campaign. And just a question from me is, when would you say is the best time to start doing this research on the money, the management, the kind of where in a company it sits, where the ownership is?
Straight after this meeting.
I would agree with Freya as soon as possible. Of course, the tactics that you may use, you may want to first of all see if you can negotiate without taking industrial action. That is the best position to be in. But as soon as you have to take industrial action, we really need to try applying pressure wherever we can.
I would just add that just make it a part of your routine to check their track record, see if there's any new breaches that have come up since you last looked, because knowledge is power. Any negotiation you're going to go into, it's good to know where they've breached regulations for a number of reasons, that it can provide good leverage.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think that seems like a good note to end on. Thank you once again to all our speakers. Sam, did you want to come in?
You're probably just about to do this, Daniel. I was going to say, are you going to plug the next couple of seminars, next couple of webinars we've got coming up? Because there's some colleagues who, I know you mentioned stuff at the beginning, but there's colleagues who've joined since you did your introduction, and possibly the digital organising course for outsourcing that we're looking at doing for some officers, but we're hoping to expand that. But I thought you might want to, probably just plug that, Daniel, if you want to.
I will. Thank you for the reminder. So we are going to be scheduling another Our Matters webinar in July, which is going to be focusing on supporting insourcing campaigns with digital campaigning tools. So linked to, again, Tabassum's example of the direct emails to the hospital management. Once we've got a date, I will send out details of that to the WhatsApp group and via email as well. And I'm just going to put the WhatsApp group in the chat as well. So it's a WhatsApp announcement only group for trade unionists organising with outsourced workers. Do click on the link and join. Tabassum, would you like to come back in before we say a final goodbye?
Yeah, sorry. Finally, I forgot to mention that we also did do hashtags for the chief executive, and whoever had a social media account, we made sure we pinned them to everything we put out as well. So then they were also targeted through, Twitter or X or whatever it is called, and Facebook, and anywhere else they did have a social media account, which again was very effective.
Great, thank you. Right, Rob, would you like to come in as well?
Yeah, it's just that I haven't got the chat enabled. I keep saying refresh and it doesn't there, so I can't click on any links. If you could find some way to disseminate it by other means.
Yes, we'll send around all the links and Freya's presentation in an email, either this afternoon or tomorrow. So thank you all once again for coming. Thanks to our great speakers. Hope you have a good afternoon and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
See you all.
Bye. Thank you very much.